Good evening, and welcome to Insight Meditation Community of Charlotte. My name is Thia, and I'll be your Dharma leader for the evening. What I'd like to bring tonight for us to investigate is a word from the Pali language. And Pali was the language commonly spoken at the time of the Buddha. And the word I'd like for us to work with tonight is Ehipassiko. This word translates to come and see. Come and see for yourself. So that begs the question, see what? See about what? So what I'd like to start with is an excerpt from a Pema Chodron talk. Pema says, there's a slight misunderstanding among almost all human beings who have ever been born on the earth. Most of us believed and still believe that the best and most skillful way to live life is to A, try to avoid pain, and B, try to just get comfortable. Sound familiar? So our brains, we can't help it. Our brains are wired this way for survival. And we can see this behavior in insects, in animals, in birds. It's quite common. We're all the same in this sense. So thank you, Pema, for that insight. But when we look at this pattern of avoiding pain and seeking comfort, we'll recognize it as the old craving and aversion duo that we hear about so much. And we know that not only is craving and aversion an illusion for happiness, it's just not skillful. It's not very interesting in the long run, and it's not advantageous for us. A much more adventurous and joyful approach to life is to begin with our innate curiosity about what's true for you, to explore, basically. When we commit to finding out what's true, it's easy to include not caring so much whether the object of our inquisitiveness is bitter or sweet, because now we're on a big adventure, and one with many levels of reward. Not that we're grasping. Ajahn Chah said, your dislikes and likes are not trustworthy guides for ultimate truth. This is a bit like traveling to a certain town and unknowingly starting out on the wrong road. And maybe we discover the correct route along the way, but we choose to stay on the course we're on because it's convenient and is comfortable compared to the right road. But we know it will not take us where we want to go. This is from his book, A Still Forest Pool. So one of the first challenges of committing to finding ultimate truth is that we're going to go against our own instinct and conditioning. As I mentioned, those old reptilian brains are wired to get the good and avoid the bad. I mean, that's just how it works. So when we try to get off the wheel of getting and avoiding or craving and aversion, we must also go against almost all of the cultural norms. So this task takes some focus and dedication. And it's helpful to have companions on the journey, because it can look like we're kind of crazy from the outside looking in to go about this. The mere practice of focusing or mindfulness is where we begin, and this is scientifically proven to bring greater and measurable happiness to your body and to alter your brain in ways that are beneficial. It turns out once we get over the initial resistance to focusing that we like to be focused instead of scattered. We're just conditioned to multitask. So mindful awareness naturally increases our flow states and paradoxically increases productivity, whether we're washing the dishes, trading stocks, or racing cars. I say paradoxically because I am a reformed multitasker who lapses from time to time. But I have to say that mindfulness is one of the most beneficial skills that I have ever acquired in my life and creates simple pleasures for me in everyday tasks. And mindfulness is just the rudimentary part of this. I have found that when I aspire to lead a life that goes beyond the cycles of craving and aversion, beyond simply wanting things to turn out my way, and these are things that I aspire to, that I have to experience some form of surrender. And surrendering to the truth of how things really are brings some pretty sobering insights. So to study the teachings of the Buddha means that we come to know that suffering is a part of all life, that my life is not excluded from that. We come to know that all things are impermanent, including Thia powers. And the real eye-opener is that I and you are a collection of sensory information and conditioning, all wrapped up in an illusory experience. At the most essential level, there is no me. So that's a lot to ponder. And I would certainly rather know than not know about these particular things so that I can proceed accordingly. Because knowing these truths sheds a really different light on my day-to-day actions. We know that operating from these three characteristics of existence, that they are part of a view that leads us to wisdom. The truth is that suffering, pain, and disappointment are actually quite malleable, that we can affect them, that we can actually have a relationship with them, and they can be shaped and changed. Another personal truth is that I often make unpleasant circumstances or experiences much worse than they actually need to be. I'll pause here to acknowledge, with respect and compassion, the beings among us who are carrying large loads of suffering. I say this with respect and compassion for those persons and their suffering. I'm not making light of suffering. The intention here is to encourage and to share experiences that might help lessen suffering. So for me, I have found exploration and engagement lessens my suffering. Again, it's paradoxical. An example of this is when in 2000, the year 2000, I was deeply unhappy. And though I was materially pretty successful, I felt personally unfulfilled and lonely. I was living in San Francisco, and a friend took me to a silent performance art event. And that event altered my life. That night, I met a Vipassana yogi who had been meditating and fasting for 10 days. He was the main event, in fact. And when I had a chance to speak with him and to look into that person's eyes, I saw a kind and awake energy. And I was absolutely sure that there was a way out of suffering. Soon after that, I was registered for my first extended silent meditation retreat, and I was on my way. On the other hand, when we stay committed to comfort at all costs, then as soon as we come up against the least edge of pain, we're likely to simply bolt just quit. Since we have not built the capacity for discomfort or taken on the commitment for knowing a deep truth, we'll never know what's beyond the temporary barriers, the walls, or the fearful things that we might encounter. So within reason, push past the mild discomfort and the urge to bolt. You all may be familiar with this. I certainly am, and I know it's a critical part of the journey. So an interesting example of righteous craving is that when we meditate, we sometimes focus on the outcome. We try to direct things. We're so intent on bettering, on getting enlightened, on somehow improving. It's pretty challenging not to want these things since we all hear about them so much of the time. Plus, this kind of craving just seems so wholesome, right? Because at least now our craving is focused on the Dharma. But we're instructed to let this go too. So pretty soon we're saying, well, if it weren't for my fill in the blank, my meditation would be great. And then we find out the fill in the blank is your meditation, is the teacher of the moment. If only we had the mindfulness to see. So a kind and focused mind state helps us recognize that after all this time on the cushion and reading and studying, that we still can feel distracted or compulsive or angry or timid or sad. And meditation is exactly about befriending all of this. It's who we are right now, and this is a come as you are kind of practice. If we're up to anything else, we're fooling ourselves. So we're employing radical acceptance, to use Tara Brach's term. And we're working with the full catastrophe. I love that John Kabat-Zinn term. We are the full catastrophe. I received an email a few days ago that said, by this time of the year, we're usually exhausted, overwhelmed, and in survival mode, much more than we know, which is why it's so important to take time to slow down and take care of ourselves, to recenter, because we can only be as connected to others as we are to ourselves. This is why we need to relax about how imperfect we think we are and just get on with the acceptance and kindness part of all this. Because cultivating a basic, dependable friendliness towards ourselves means that we're able to be friendly with everyone else too. Speaking of imperfect, I still drift. I still wander off when I sit to meditate, or as I aspire to fully complete a task and be present the whole time. It's so essential for me to have this diligent and kind part of myself that is always at the ready and always says, Thia, honey, come back, come back. So that's the ground for the practice, a precise sense of good-heartedness for ourselves, of just seeing for yourself how it is right now. It's not selfish, it's the threshold of deep compassion. And that's one of the things that helps keep my practice fresh and alive right now. That and a sense of humor about often feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, and in survival mode, especially during the holidays. So compassion, the fuel for awakening, the heart's ability to care deeply about everybody's freedom from suffering, everybody without exception, even ourselves. We keep coming back to practice again and again. With openness to the outcome, we're more interested in receiving truth than to getting to a predetermined state. Ehipassiko is the Buddha's teaching for this. It simply translates as come and see, come and see. Bhikkhu Bodhi writes, one of Buddhism's most attractive features is its emphasis on self-reliance. This teaching about our capacity to liberate ourselves is a distinctive feature of early Buddhism and offers remarkable affirmation of the human potential. Throughout his ministry, the Buddha urged his disciples to be islands to yourselves, be refuges to yourselves, be diligent, come and see. So there's this experiential emphasis here that I love about these teachings. Bodhi further writes, since wisdom or insight is the chief instrument of enlightenment, the Buddha always asked his disciples to follow him on the basis of their own understanding, not from obedience, not from some unquestioning truth. Trust. He calls his Dhamma Ehipassiko several times throughout the teachings, which again means come and see for yourself. He invites us to investigate his teachings, to examine it in the light of our own reason and intelligence, and to gain confirmation of its truth for ourselves through sustained inquiry. So the ground for an alive kind of practice has everything to do with curiosity and compassion, and very little to do with legalism and right and wrong. Sure, we do have moral codes, and some take precepts, and we honor that. And we're still told to start right where we are. That's the only place we can honestly start. That old saying, we do not see things as they are, but as we are, is the truth. I believe treating yourself with as much honesty, gentleness, and respect is so important. Treat yourself as someone that you respect and admire, and then aspire to live up to that. As students of the Buddha, we cultivate the intention to see ourselves clearly as possible, and to surround ourselves with Sangha so that we can hold up mirrors of truth to each other. There's a saying in the recovery community that I like a lot. It goes like this: is she not a victim of the delusion that she can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only she manages well? Do you hear the struggle there? Wrestling, trying to get satisfaction. Don't fall prey to the delusion that simply avoiding pain and grasping at pleasure, to simply manage well, is all there is to happiness, because there is so much more available. Keep coming back to see for yourself. Really try your practice on in a way that is sustainable for you. Again and again, Nisargadatta, the Indian mystic, wrote, the mind creates the abyss, the heart crosses it. I invite you to join me and continue to see for yourself.